Oh,
All right, preparing to live stream the meeting, and then I have to quickly mute myself because otherwise it will like play back. Um, right, it's loading. All right, here we go. We're now live.
hi
Um,
everyone.
So yeah, to everyone watching, one person right now, um, welcome to the Navigating Publishing While Marginalized panel. We have an amazing set of panelists here, a mix of writers and an awesome literary agent, which we're really excited to have. So I'm just going to start off by having everyone introduce themselves. I'm Olivia, the moderator, one of the mentors for Roundtable Mentor. So yeah, I'll start with Kara since you're at the that end of my.
Hello everyone. My name is Karis Rogerson. I am a writer of sapphic romances for multiple age categories, none of which have been published yet, so you can't read them. But you should read them eventually. And I am gonna popcorn to Shayla Knigge.
Hi, my name is Shayla Carnegie. I am a literary agent at Highline Literary Collective. We started in 2023, and so we're coming up on our 2-year anniversary. And I work across middle grade to adult fiction, and I'm really happy to be here.
I'll popcorn it to Yuva next.
Hi everyone, I'm Yuva. I'm an author of, I guess you would say speculative fiction, but mainly horror. In most age categories as well, but my debut does come out from Putnam Children's next year as a YA horror. Kill Your Darlings. There are no links available at the moment, but hopefully very soon. And I will popcorn to Z.
Hi everyone, I am Z Quay, and my debut romantasy novel with a bisexual love triangle inspired by Chinese vampire lore is coming out January 2027. It's called A Curse Carved in Ink, and it's coming out with Simon and Schuster. I'm also queer, yay for sapphic, and neurodivergent. So I was gonna say, and a person of color, but I think that is visual.
Thank you all. I've had the pleasure of reading Z's debut, so everyone should go pre-order. It's amazing. But yeah, thank you all for introducing yourselves. I just want to preface the panel by saying, this is one of the more sensitive topics that we've decided to discuss for a roundtable panel. So we just want to make sure that for all panelists to be as vague or as specific as you're comfortable with, and for anyone watching who wants to ask more specific questions or maybe more sensitive questions, feel free to DM any of the mentors on any of the platforms or in the RTM Discord. We just want to make sure that any of those conversations are happening in private just for the protection of our panelists and also for people asking. But yeah, so just wanted to preface all of that. And I'm going to just jump into the first question, which is, were there any specific things you looked for while choosing an agent to work with to help champion your story and more importantly, your author career? I just want to add to that, if you could give a little background of your querying journey, I think that's always really interesting for querying writers. And then for Shayla, specifically as an agent, what considerations do you make for championing marginalized authors, and how does your own identity influence how you evaluate and champion manuscripts, especially from marginalized authors?
I
I
think,
can,
oh,
oh,
go ahead.
sorry. I will talk about my querying journey, which was very long because I sent my first queries back in 2014 when I thought I was a straight woman. And then I got my agent in 2023, literally 9 years later, after coming out as queer, and had like a whole journey over the 9 years of like changing as a person. And thankfully, my first books were not picked up by any agents because they were really bad. But that's neither here nor there. Um, when I was querying and researching agents, I really tried to take a look not just at their manuscript wish lists to make sure that like for me it was like, okay, are they saying that specifically that they're looking for like LGBTQIA plus stories or authors? Are they open and like specifically looking for marginalized stories, whether that's stories representing disability or racial diversity, ethnic background, like any of that? I was really wanted to make sure that the agents were not just open to diverse stories, but like specifically championing them. And also, one tip I would give is like you can look at an agent's client list and just like they might say on their website, they're like, I'm really looking to champion, BIPOC and LGBTQIA plus stories. But if their client list is all white and mostly cishet, that might not be it. It could just be a matter of whatever, but it could also be like maybe they're not the right fit or they don't know personally, like, specifically how to champion diverse stories. I spent a lot of time paying attention to agents and their agencies also, and just like making sure like that the agency had marginalized people or backgrounds and diversity, that the agent was representing a wide array of experiences, and that they were open about looking for that. Um, yeah, and I eventually signed with Eric Smith, who is now at Neighborhood Literary. So I figure that's relevant information.
I would say
Who
for
else was
me,
starting to talk?
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I said I think someone else was starting to talk, but then you started to talk, so go ahead.
I would say for me, something that is very important to me as I'm going through manuscripts and taking on clients is I really want any story to feel genuine to the author's lived experience. So for me, I am a queer woman of color. So when I have manuscripts, I want to make sure that it's not being told from a marginalized perspective. If it's not by a marginalized person, I think in this day and age, it's very important to ensure that the stories that are coming forward from marginalized communities are told by people from those communities so that those stories can be heard, whether that be BIPOC, whether that be cishet, trans, genderqueer, and even if it's a disability, I feel like it's very important that you understand not just the world that we live in, but the characters on a cellular level. Because if you don't, it then becomes a matter of what makes you the right person to tell this story. And so I want to make sure that whenever I'm taking on a story, I can champion it fully. And for me, that means that the story has to feel authentic to the author and the story that they're trying to tell.
I might piggyback off that. I suppose I had not I guess an unimpressive or impressive, like let's just say middling querying journey is probably the accurate word for it. So I think I started querying in like August 22, and then I got my first agent offer in March 2023. So we're talking sort of like 6 to 8 months ish. And I'm signed with Kara Alexi at Azantian Literary Agency, which is somewhat like from my perspective, particularly at the time when I was choosing my plethora of agents to query at the time, had already quite a significant like sort of background and reputation I found in the industry for like championing diverse stories, particularly those of people of color, which was a big factor for me, no matter who I was picking. And I'm like, I think at the time, and I feel like this has probably remained the case since I started querying, but also since I started researching, so probably 21, 22-ish, there have been a lot of wish lists out there from agents in particular that do say, look, we champion marginalized stories, particularly like when you look at speculative fiction, they're looking for fantasies that are from a non-Western background, fantasies where, England is not the main setting or England did not form the basis for the main setting. And it's always very interesting because I do think that there is a genuine, I think a genuine, I guess, intention behind the industry to champion those stories and have acknowledged that there is a gap or maybe like an absence of those stories taking the forefront of a particular genre. For me, Azantian was the perfect fit because I could see that they did definitely put their money where their mouth was. Like it was absolutely a cast of agent and agency siblings at the time where I felt seen and I felt very visible. Like it wasn't like I was the singular BIPOC or disabled or whatever it might be, a person like in the crowd of someone who crowd of people who weren't so marginalized. I think, look, I think it can be very difficult sometimes making a call because you never know where someone's intention is coming from until you actually do speak to them. And I think what Kara said is an important thing, factoring what people's client lists look like, what the agents, not just the agents, but the agency's client list looks like, the kinds of books that they've championed in the past, particularly if there are any, uncomfortable associations made later as well. And there have been agents and agencies like that that have come up post querying and post research, and I think maybe the only advice I have for people looking to get into the trenches is don't be too hard on yourself as well, because there isn't this information for a reason, right? Like, I mean, it's and you look at any kind of walk of life that you're in, not just in publishing, but like just generally when you're looking for employment, there is a reason why the negative or the bad stories don't always make it out there, and do the best that you can, but also accept that there will always be a limit, and don't be too hard on yourself if you find yourself crossing that limit or being on the other, like, unfortunate side of that limit. You've tried your best, and most people, from what I've seen, most people have the best of intentions, particularly if they don't come from a marginalized background themselves. And I'm quite lucky because Care is not only marginalized themselves, but also was only actively looking for marginalized authors at the time to rep. So, and continues to remain that way. So I was quite lucky, and like I said, I'm in part of a cast of characters that are very, very similar to myself. So I feel quite blessed in that respect. I was also quite conscious of people who were specifically looking for South Asian stories when I was doing my research, because my title at the time, it's now Kill Your Darlings, my debut, but at the time when I was querying, it was called Rakshasa, which was obviously it was a non-Western name, and I think people's associations, if they didn't have any kind of South Asian law background, would have immediately associated it with like supernatural, for example, and like I was also very conscious that I was coming out there. I was very visible in my querying journey that I was looking for, like my book was not about or was about marginalized stories. It was about a South Asian or a Tamil woman or Tamil teenager, and it was very obvious to anyone reading anything about it, be it a query or some pages, that she was a person of color, and I factored that into the kinds of things that I was looking for. And it sometimes, depending on the genre that you're also querying for, I can see it like becoming I don't actually know where I was going to go with that train of thought. I think I'm just going to say that try your best to see if you can find agents who are looking for the specific things that you're thinking about, like, and specific concepts or specific marginalizations, not just generally that they're open to marginalized creators, because it can be you're never really sure which kind of marginalization or the specific people. They might have their own idea in mind, and you want to make sure that you're protecting yourself at the end of the day.
Yeah, I'll finish then. So I actually had the slog experience and the unicorn experience. So the first time I queried was a few years back, and I got nothing. Like no one was interested. I didn't get like a single full request or anything. And so I edited for like a year, which sounds crazy for a lot of people. They're like, "Oh my God, why would you edit for a year?" But yeah, I edited for like a year or almost two, I think. And then I went out again, and it must have been vastly improved because I got my first full request within 24 hours. Um, and then they just kind of like started out from there. So I did it a really funny way. I was like, I'm just gonna aim for the stars. And I worked backwards for my favorite authors. So I would find like queer authors, like Asian authors, etc., and look at who represented them, because I figured, if they represented my favorite authors to like to the best of their ability and did so well, then they'll probably like me too. And that clearly worked because I ended up signing with Sulin Tan's agent. Sulin Tan wrote Daughter of the Moon Goddess, Naomi Davis from Bookends Literary, and they ended up being the best champion for me. Like we hopped on the call, and we somehow both realized, oh my God, we're both queer. Oh my gosh, we both have ADHD, and we both have endometriosis. And like, yeah, it was like really, really amazing. We clicked immediately, and and they've been really, really good for me. I definitely agree. Look at their client list. That's really, really important. But not just their client list, but look at Publishers Marketplace. Highly recommend just getting like a 1 month subscription from Publishers Marketplace and having a look. I will caveat that with saying that if this agent is a new agent and hasn't had many deals yet, don't write them off either, because I have friends who signed with new agents who ended up like getting them excellent deals that really, really worked for them. Yeah, Yuva's pointing to herself. But yeah, so definitely don't write them off as well. It just so happened that I ended up with an agent who did have a really good track record. I think more important than like how many they've signed, is to look at the overall picture, right? I think a new agent who doesn't have a huge track record yet, but you can connect with them and you can tell that they really care. They're, from a marginalized background. They are really passionate about these stories. You can pick these things up from like an agent call kind of usually. But also maybe they've written. So something else I did was that I tried to find anything they'd written or any videos that they'd done, any panels that they'd done. That was something important for me. So like Shayla's on this panel, that gives you a sign that this is something that Shayla cares about. That's really, really important. So I think more important than how many they've signed is that if they have like is what they've said about the topic, what they've done about the topic, um, and if they do have a track record, that's still also to me not good enough. So I think like their track record, but also look at the actual track record. So for example, if they have tons of six-figure deals, but all of their six-figure deals are like, mainstream straight white authors, then maybe think about that a little bit as well, because something I really loved about Naomi is that they have championed so many marginalized authors successfully. Um, because some of them like maybe they'll I do have some friends who've had agents who don't necessarily prioritize marginalized stories or don't necessarily understand marginalized stories. I think that understanding is so, so, so important. So in the author call, I think definitely pay attention to the way they speak about your book, right? If the way they speak about your book shows that they have a very like surface level understanding of it, or they don't really relate to any of the themes that you've explored, I think that's an important consideration. But yeah, like for example, uh, my agent actually has an assistant who started building her own list. And so her list isn't huge, but Sophie is amazing because like Sophie's been with Naomi for ages and like is just so, so, so on top of it, like really, really cares. So I think less important than the size of an agent's list is who they are as a person. So like what have they done to actually put their money where their mouth is, I guess. Um, and sometimes this is about selling, sometimes it's about how much they relate to your book, sometimes it's about their contribution to the community. So, do they volunteer their time? Do they volunteer their expertise? Have they talked about this topic? I think all of that is really important. So that's my 2 cents.
I wonder if it's okay if I say something in addition real quick. It I like didn't say it the first time I was speaking because I was still a little nervous, but I'm gonna say it now because it feels like it bears saying, which is that I am marginalized in that I am a queer woman and I am a disabled woman, but I'm a white woman, which like in publishing means that I am one of the most privileged, like one of the like publishing is run mostly by it seems white women, and so I do have a lot of I have privilege, and I am always one thing that I want to say about myself, but also to say to like other marginalized authors who are also white is just as we can be harmed, we can also do harm. So one thing that I looked for when I looked for agents was I wasn't just looking for an agent who has is marginalized themselves and has a lot of marginalized clients because I wanted to be protected, but because I felt confident that the agent would be someone who could hold me accountable when it comes to my writing if I am doing harm. I try to write very diverse worlds. I have characters of color, I have disabled characters, I have queer characters who aren't white lesbian women, I have trans characters, like I have characters that don't always match my exact identity. And so I want to make sure that the agent that I'm working with, and I think you know, I'm very confident in my agent that he will do this. Um, I wanted it to be someone who could look at me and say like, "Hey, this was maybe like a harmful line. Like you that rethink it." Without then turning around and saying like writing me off or being like awful, awful person, right? Recognizing that there are experiences that I haven't had, um, and that I can do my best to represent the world accurately, but I can also mess up. And I want my team to be diverse enough and like rounded enough in experiences that they can keep me from harming readers, especially because the first books I wrote 8 YA novels in a row, and I feel very it is a deep responsibility to write kidlit, in my opinion, because the main audience is minors, it's kids and teens, and I really want to make sure that I'm not harming them. I don't want to harm adults either, but it's different. Okay, I'm done.
Yeah,
You
thank
could say that you don't want to harm it. Like, I mean, not like that, but like there are
Yeah.
some adults that might need to be harmed. Anyway.
That actually really reminds me. I know this is not on the pre-list of questions, so I'm sorry, this is unfair. But I think Shayla and also Karis and reminded me of, I think, a really interesting topic that I don't even personally know the answer of. So if there are no answers, that's okay. But when you think about writing a perspective that's not your own identity, or you're writing a different potentially marginalized identity through your character, how do you guys how do you suggest going about that in a way that is sensitive? Do you think that's something that can be done responsibly, or do you think people should generally shy away from it unless it's absolute necessary? Like, what are, in your opinions, the nuances of doing that? Because obviously that I feel like that comes up a lot, and I always get different answers and different opinions, and I think it's a really interesting topic. So, if people have any thoughts, but if not, we can move on to the next question.
I
I
don't think that you should
oh,
necessarily. Oh, go ahead.
no, 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 you go, you go.
Okay. I don't think that anyone should necessarily shy away from writing diverse characters, primarily because we live in a diverse world, and so the idea that we would not write diverse characters feels very irresponsible in that sense. I think that the way you go about it is very important. An example that I use often is I did queer critiques for a while, and there came a point where a cishet man had queried a book that he was writing, and he was wondering why it wasn't being picked up. And he was writing from the perspective of a young Black girl. And when I explained to them that that might be the reason, he said, I just want to bring attention to people like yo, which was not the answer that I needed. I needed him to make sure that he was doing it or writing this for a reason that was impactful, not because he wanted to bring attention to my community, because people from my community, we can write those stories. So I think when it comes to writing diverse characters, it needs to be done with intention and not just wanting to bring attention to a character that's not your lived experience. I think it's important that you write those characters and understand the why behind it and how you're presenting these characters. And if you are going to write them, making sure that you have critique partners or beta readers from those diverse and marginalized communities who can tell you, hey, this is not appropriate, or this is why this is not working. Because if you just take your perspective of it and you don't take the time to do the research and become informed, you are doing harm to not just your characters and your readers, but to your potential career as an author as a whole.
I want to piggyback off that, and I think it's a really interesting question. I feel like it gets thrown around, particularly since I've been sort of mired in publishing sort of for like the last 5-ish years. It's a really, and I feel like it's a very easy like sort of gotcha question as well at the same time. It's like, oh well, you don't want me to write diversely, or you don't want me to write characters that look like you. And I'm like, it's a very interesting question because I feel like there's a lot of nuance there that people it does take a long time to explain, I think, people's answers for for this question in particular. And I feel like then that sometimes like completely throws the entire question into disarray. But I guess from my perspective, the way I see it is exactly what you're saying, Shreya. I think intention matters a lot here. I think also like the way that you I think two things that people don't discuss enough are also point of view and setting. And like what I'm gonna say is like like I'm South Asian. I'm like my parents are from India. I grew up on Bollywood, and like when you watch Bollywood movies or you read novels from a different country, you will see very different settings. You will see a diverse world because that world in itself is very different to your own, particularly if you don't live in that country. But you will not see it in terms of diverse, in terms of particularly maybe race and maybe even things like sexuality, disability, because of, particularly, cultural differences around those topics and things that people are very conscious about writing. And I think, like, for example, if you're setting a book that is like, for example, I'm in Sydney. If you set a book in Sydney and you don't include a single person of color, and I'm going to be very specific and say you don't include a single Asian character, it is very weird because, like, I go out into the world and I see, like, there are a lot of people who look like me walking down the street, right? And that's where I think setting is really important as a factor. Like, if you're writing a book, I feel like that is set in the Western world, it's very hard for you to get away. And I think that that goes towards the authenticity of the kind of work that you're writing, in which diversity is not one open and visible, and there are certain types of diversity that won't be as visible and open as others, but there will be certain types of diversity that are very, very, very visible. And if you're not acknowledging that, you need to then, I think, go back and consider what kind of story you're writing and what kind of intention you had behind the story that you're writing and who you're writing it for. And I think the where point of view comes into that is that, like, I believe in writing diverse worlds. I probably fall on the side of not writing from the perspective of someone who has a marginalization that I personally do not share. And I think things like self-diagnosis and things like that are absolutely valid in those circumstances. But I think it's if you're writing from the perspective of someone and they have a marginalization, if you kind of don't understand the emotional intricacy of being that kind, like, to have that marginalization, it does come off. It can be hard to be, I feel, authentic and sensitive in that respect. And I'm not saying that perspective needs to be wholly positive. And I think that that's also where people kind of get a bit concerned. Like, you can show the negative aspects of a particular marginalization. People have a lot of feelings, and their feelings are valid. I know I'm not trying to make this like a therapy talk kind of thing, but like, I think if, like, people say from a who are BIPOC might have all kinds of views and feelings and thoughts that have evolved or devolved over the years about their experiences of being BIPOC. And I think this applies equally because I'm disabled, I'm neurodivergent, I'm queer. But like, it's I feel like those are I feel like you should not be ashamed of showing the bad sides as well, because that's how we get more authentic stories out there, and that's how we get a more, I think, diverse understanding. I feel like you use books as a vehicle of people understanding other people and other stories and other experiences. Negative comes with the positive, and we shouldn't shy away from that. In my very specific experience, in my main cast of four and five in my debut, two are Tamil, like myself. So I was very conscious of how I was coming off. Like, was I being too negative at some points? Was I making some jokes that were a bit stereotypical? But from my perspective, they weren't stereotypical because I genuinely felt them, and I think other people of my race and ethnicity would agree with me. And then I had two out of the five were Egyptian Jewish. And so I myself am not Jewish and I'm not Egyptian. What I did during the querying process, or prior to querying when I was revising, I did solicit sensitivity reads, and I accept it's very hard for you to shell out money for those kinds of reads. They can be quite steep, particularly when you are not an agented author or an author with a deal. I think, see if you can do things like trades. I don't know how easy it is right now with Twitter being what it is, but if you can find a good community, like Shayla was saying, like critique partners, beta readers, people who can point out things that you're not in a position to point out yourself. I think that's a really helpful resource, trying to find people from that community who might want to. And who knows, like I've had situations where people have like not thought about it, but because I proposed a trade, they were like, oh, maybe I'll include a South Asian character. And like, it's I don't know what the I guess like what the I guess the moral reasoning behind that is, but I'm not going to debate it too much. But I think that that's a good way of trying to get a decent set of eyes before you can afford to pay for something, particularly if you're not in a position to do that. So I did a lot of trades initially, and I think that that worked out, if only not because I was worried I was doing harm. Um, they definitely pointed out places where I could have, fleshed out the world better. And I thought that was more helpful to me because I did want it to be authentic. I didn't want it to just have like someone with a sign on their back that said that they were Egyptian Jewish. I wanted it to feel real that they were Egyptian Jewish, the way that the other two main characters were Tamil, South Asian, etc. So, yeah, those are my 2 cents.
That actually inspired a thought for me when you said setting. I was like, oh my God, because I grew up overseas. I grew up in Italy, but I'm not Italian. But I was like, I gotta set a book in Italy, like I gotta set it in my hometown. But I also, and it's different because Italians aren't BIPOC. I don't know if that's controversial. It is for some people, but the one like anyway. So it's not like I'm saying that like it's a slightly different, but the I knew that I was going to write from the perspective of Americans in Italy because that's the experience that I have. I don't know what it's like to be Italian, born and raised in an Italian family in Italy. And so I think resetting, like you can set your books in places. I if you want to write, say, like a travel story or something, I personally would not write from the perspective of someone who is local to a place where you don't have that experience. So that's the thought that came to mind.
Uh, Read as diversely as you want to write. That's really, really important. So, read books like Immortal Dark, The Jasmine Throne, This Woven Kingdom. Read as diversely as you want to write. I think that's really important. So, years and years ago, I wrote a YA set in Australia, and I had to write diverse characters. Like, there was no way. Like, for example, I wanted Indigenous Australian representation because it just makes no sense to have a book set in a high school in Australia and not have a single Indigenous Australian person. But I am not Indigenous Australian. So something I did was I went out and read tons of different books. I actually made a TikTok where I talked about Terry Janke's book, True Tracks, Respecting Indigenous Knowledge. And that actually got quite a bit of attention. And I got reached out to by a lot of Indigenous writers, including Mel Saward, who is like an Indigenous author and academic. And they educated me. They took the time to educate me, which was really, really wonderful because they could see that I was making an effort, I think. And so they were willing to like answer questions and things like that, even though they absolutely did not have to. And I also had a character that I wanted to use Auslang. And so I signed up for an Auslang course. Don't ask me anything now. I've already forgotten everything, but I need to refresh my Auslang. So absolutely do your research. Like as writers and people who work in publishing, we know the power of books, right? That's one of the best places you can start. Absolutely read as diversely as you want to write. But and something else that was discussed, yeah, absolutely trade books. So if one of the questions later on, I think, is about community. But when you find a community, they can be the absolute best resource, right? Because if you have a diverse set of friends, a diverse set of writers, that can be the best way forward. So something that I did when I was so Olivia's son is actually my critique partner. Sorry to put you on the spot, but I made sure that when I was looking for people to read my book, that I was finding like, a wide range of people with different experiences, or even as well as similar experiences. So something that Kara's touched on was how you can possibly do harm to your own community sometimes as well. Um, and I've actually done tons of sensitivity reads for fellow Chinese authors, who were afraid that, they hadn't like used Mandarin correctly or their representation of Chinese folklore because my family practiced Chinese folk religion was not accurate, etc. So I had like Chinese readers and queer readers and readers who were not of my background, who were from different ethnicities, etc. And I think that's really excellent. Even though my debut is set in China with like a full Chinese cast, so that's not necessarily something I have to think about, at least not as an outsider, but you'd be shocked. The problem with being POC, with being queer, with being disabled, with being neurospicy, etc., is that sometimes you are held to like a really ridiculous standard where, a white person has, well, a white person who is not of any marginalization, they tend to be able to be viewed as an individual, right? But for example, we have to think about how this might be the first queer book they read, the first Sapphic book they read, the first South Indian book they read, the first Chinese book they read, etc. And how are we representing our community? Because unfortunately, there are readers, there are publishers who will look at us and be like, well, this is the experience of everyone, and they're speaking for their entire community, although we never can, right? And I've spoken to some authors who are, who have had that burden placed on them. Like Tigges, Shelley Parker Chan, they've kind of been put on this pedestal as like, oh my God, which is, wonderful. Absolutely, they deserve the fame, but that's a lot of pressure to put on a marginalized author, you know? Um, but so sometimes we have to be a bit more careful, even though it's unfair, but it's like a very real reality, right? Real reality. I word good. Where they are we are viewed as representative of our entire community. So definitely meet people who have similar experiences to you, but meet people who have different experiences to you. Both are very, very important.
Yeah, thanks everyone. I think those were great answers. Z, you touched on my next question, which is how do you have tips for marginalized writers on building and finding a support system? And then to kind of tack onto that, like how do you recommend caring for your mental health in an industry as a marginalized author or agent or just publishing person in general navigating this industry?
Well, I've dropped some big names. You guys might be wondering, how did you connect with Tigist or Shelley Parker Chan or any of those people?
I
I
have
just
those
slide in.
questions myself.
I just slide into their DMs. Like, I mean, not even kidding.
Can
That's
you
the thing.
introduce me to Shelley? Like, I mean,
Oh, I'm not super close with Shelly, unfortunately, but if I do though, like we've spoken a bit. Well, that's the thing. So I'll slide into their DMs and I'll be like, "I love you. I love your book. I think you are so cool." And I was doing this before I ever got like a book deal. Like, because Shelley Parker Chan, for example, is like, yeah, like as it literally my debut is was influenced by them because they were one of the first like queer Asian authors that really made it big, and so literally before I ever got my book deal, I was just like, "Ellie, you're so cool." Okay, so my technique sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but like I think it's just about like if you want to connect with those authors, it's about being like really, really genuine and absolutely never ever expecting a reply. Like I reach out to them, never expecting a reply. And when they don't reply, I do not hold it against them. I'm like, you are a busy, busy person, and that is okay. But sometimes it has to come from a place of like enthusiasm and excitement and like passion, where you just want to talk to them because their books have had such an amazing impact on you. They have made you believe in this industry. They have made you think, wow, there's a place for me, and they're really carving out a spot for diverse authors. Like just reach out to them. If they don't respond, that's totally okay. But I think in terms of building community, to go back to that question, because heaps of my closest friends are not like anywhere near that famous yet. I'm convinced they will be. And yeah, like really, so really try to join groups. You know what? I'm not going to take over. You guys talk. I feel like I'm yapping too much. It's like back to back yapping. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
you're saying that, but I think I'm falling into the same trap as you. I I think it's I think it's a hard question sometimes, and particularly because, like, I think for all of us, social media has changed so much, and it really was like the vehicle that we all use to form our communities the way that we have them today. And it's very different to what it was when I first started. Like, I got into like sort of writing Twitter in 2020-ish, and so again, it's very different to what it was. And the people that I know and I am very close to today, they don't even use, a lot of them don't even use Twitter anymore, or are very sparingly on Twitter. A lot of people have migrated to, there's a lot of different options out there, but I think the two main ones seem to be Instagram and Blue Sky. And I think a lot of it is, and then Threads, of course, as well. And I think it's also genre dependent, particularly if you are trying to find a community, which is interesting because I think people shift in terms of the kinds of genre that they do. Like, I know people who write, contemporary, but they also write horror. They also write fantasy, and so it's. I'm going to say it's hard, and I know that that's going to be like the really despondent negative answer, but I think it's still possible. I think it's finding the people where they are most likely to hibernate. And I think, particularly, I feel like for speculative fiction, if I'm not completely out of, completely, I don't know, throwing paint at the wall when I say this, but I think Blue Sky might be better for speculative fiction in particular. I feel like a lot of fantasy, sci-fi, horror writers have moved to Blue Sky, and I know a lot of people like the text-based thing. So that's another thing. Like, if you prefer text-based to images, which I'm more on Instagram than I am on Blue Sky because my Instagram is also my personal Instagram, but like I I'm not a picture person, and it case in point, it took me, like, I had to put on makeup for this call, so that's why I'm not a picture person. I overthink it. And but Instagram, Threads, I feel is more like maybe for romance and contemporary. I feel like there's a lot more romance and contemporary authors on there. Sometimes it's just about like I felt like I built my community by people who are in the same sort of like a stage of my publishing career. Like, it was people that were querying with me, or people who were drafting and revising with me. They were people who were betaing for me and critiquing for me. And sometimes it's just about like hey, I've got this, like, I don't know, 80,000 word manuscript, and like, here's the pitch. Anyone want to like beta? And sometimes it's just about like building those connections, and you never know who you're going to get, right? It's like going to any kind of like scary potluck, meet and greet kind of thing, or networking event, and you never know who you're going to gel with and who you're not. And there are people, I'm not going to say that I never thought I would gel with them, but I just didn't know them from anything, and they were just someone who, maybe offered a beta read, and suddenly they're like, now today, 5 years on or 4 years on, they're like one of my closest friends in terms of writing, and we talk about everything and we talk about anything, and it's those kinds of connections that I think are the most important because, particularly in terms of maintaining your mental health, you need someone to vent to, because there will be hard days, there will be difficult days. And I don't mean in the sense that publishing is kicking you, but just in general, like, it's hard to build up motivation, just not sure if it's going to happen, or things are just like not going down the unicorn experience the way that you'd hoped it would be. And sometimes people just like do things that you just need like a sense check or a vibe check. And your community is the person to go to for that. There's a reason why, like, underlying a lot of the like discourse and stuff like that on social media, you'll see, keep it to the group chat. There's a reason, because the group chat is, cross your fingers, a safe place. I'm not going to talk about bad art friend because the whole subpoenaing people's group chats really scared me, and I've never really gotten over that, particularly as a lawyer. Because like I say a lot of shit to people in group chats that I really shouldn't be. Anyway, but I think all I can say is that I feel like I already said this at the beginning, but like, don't be too hard on yourself. It's hard, and I feel like writers in general, I'm generalizing here, but we all sort of share a similar personality type, or people who are in publishing in general. I feel like there is a like we I'm gonna say I feel like extroverted introvert or introverted extrovert, but the reason why I really laugh when I say that is because I have ADHD myself, and so I feel like that is like, I'm actually an introverted extrovert or an extroverted introvert because I have ADHD. I'm not going to make that assumption for everyone. My mother thinks I diagnose too many people with ADHD nowadays, but I think we all have that sort of similar, like, we feel scared to reach out, we feel scared to to talk to people. We're not sure where it's going to go. Maybe we've had bad friendships and toxic friendships in the past, and we're scared. And this feels very personal and vulnerable to us, particularly the things that we're writing about and sharing. And you never know what kind of feedback you're going to get, and it's going to hurt. And people want to avoid that as much as they can. I think the hard answer is that you can't avoid it. As much as that sucks, you can't avoid it, and you can't avoid bad actors in this in any kind of space. You can only do what's, right and good for you. You're doing things in good faith. You're trying to make connections in good faith. Don't be too hard on yourself, and yeah, shoot your shot. I think following what Z's saying, like really just do. Like I did this. Like I'm not that type of person. I'm not the type of person to slip into people's DMs. But I saw Alexis Henderson's public I think it was a Publishers Marketplace or maybe Publishers Weekly post. She's an imprint sibling of mine now, so I was like, "This is going to be fun." I have a way in. Yeah, congratulations, we're imprint siblings, and she did respond, which was fantastic. But expect that they won't respond. But still, again, like writers are people, even as big as they might get. And if you don't know that today, like I met Camilla Cole in person, and she's I'm gonna say she's a friend of mine. But I never thought when like she felt like someone who was like phenomenal and amazing to like meet and speak to, and now I have a photo of her and me on my Instagram, like that kind of stuff, and it's like, wow, this is scary. But writers are people too. And I say that for all of us as well as anyone who is, and I'm sure we're all going to be, big and massive and bestseller level famous, but there are definitely people behind those books and people behind those computers. So yeah, take it easy. Don't uh shoot your shot and don't overthink it.
Yeah, something I wanted to add on to what you said is authors I found I'm sure there are a few bad eggs, but authors I found are genuinely, and publishing people are just the loveliest people ever. And you need to hold on to your positive experiences because my imprint sibling is Gabby Burton. And when I first signed with Naomi, I was like, Gabby, Sing Me to Sleep was so good. And she was like, ah, hello. And you just hold on to experiences like that. I think so much of my confidence comes from those early experiences. One of the first proper author friends I made was Gabby Burton, but then in person was Keish Chow. And Keish Chow was so lovely and introduced me to like her other author friends. And I was like, oh, and that's how I met a lot of my friends. And that's the thing. Like there might be a few bad eggs. I also have ADHD, but I have the type of ADHD where I forget all my bad experiences. So I can't remember a single bad egg. But you hold on to like the good eggs and you tell yourself, oh, well, if I'm brave and I go for it, maybe I'll meet more good eggs. And then I can have more photos with Camila Cole or Keith Chow or Gabby Burton, things like that. And it just warms your heart. So definitely don't hesitate to reach out, like to any of us. If I can respond, I absolutely will because I always love making new friends.
I would say, first of all, everything that Yuva and Z said was spot on. Lovely answers. Loved listening and like hearing your experiences. I would say I want you to have tenacity because, like, I think they both said, like, sometimes you might reach out to someone, they won't respond. You might swap pages, and it's just not the right fit. And have the audacity to just like message people. And I mean, as long as you don't do it in a way that's like, hi, I'm expecting something from you. But when you come at it with the like, I'm a fan, I love what you do. I have met so many people because I've been interviewing authors since 2016, first on my blog, then for various websites. Now I have a podcast. Like, I just reached out and was like, hey, I love you. I want to like help the people who follow me who maybe don't follow you. I want them to also follow you. So, like, can I talk to you? And people like, what are they going to do? Be like, no, how dare you try and champion my work? Like, that doesn't happen. So having the audacity can get you very far. I also wanted to say I started like seriously pursuing publishing in 2013. So it's been like, over a decade. I am ancient. I've been through a million eras of the bookish internet. Like when I started, it was Facebook groups. That's where you found people. Um, it was like Pitch Wars was thriving and they had like Facebook groups and I met so many friends. And then all of a sudden it was like, okay, now we're on Twitter and now we're on Blue Sky and Threads and Discord is a big one too. I found so many groups on Discord, and I found them just by being like finding one person who was like, "Hey, let me invite you to this community that I'm in." And then I was like, "Hey, I want to be in more communities." And they were like, "We'll invite you over here. We'll invite you to the romance one. Like you can come over here." And then I like met people, and you don't it can be very overwhelming. Like Discord itself can be terrifying. When I was first added to Discord, I was like, I'm never gonna say a word here. And now in the Discord that I run, I'm the number one yapper. Who could have seen it coming? But oh God, I just lost my train of thought. That's so embarrassing. Anyway, yeah, let's just end with that. I'm the number one yapper.
Can attest, Karis is the number one yapper. I can hear her Discord notifications going off on our calls sometimes because, ironically enough, Karis and I met through a Discord server, and we started out as just sprint buddies because I used to write when I had actual time to do anything besides read. Um, but it's little things like that. I have made some of my best friends through Discord groups and sprinting. And the thing is, those aren't necessarily connections that you make because you expect something of them. It's just because you have a natural connection. You have this thing that you both do and you both love. But I will say, I have been going to a lot of writing conferences recently, and I know people say to touch grass, but go outside, go to conferences, and talk to people. I've seen people form writing groups in person that then are transferred online because they're meeting people and they are connecting about the things that they write or the things that they want to do with their careers as authors, which I think is very important because I listened to a podcast a few months ago where they said that a lot of authors don't continue on past their debut year, and that's because of a lack of support. And that might be from their publisher or their readers, but it's the thing is, for publishing, it's such a solitary career space, and you do get so siloed. So you have to create those connections, not just with other debut authors or other people on this path, but people who have been there before. I also like to stress to people, you need to find some sort of activity or creative outlet that is not wrapped up in capitalism. I always recommend pottery because I love it, but I think it's it becomes so easy to think of this is what I do for work and then kind of burn yourself out really quickly. And so not just for marginalized creators, but for anyone in this industry, find something that you love that you are creating just for yourself, because at one point your writing was just for you. And then you queried it and it was no longer just yours. It became something for someone else to sell and bring to a broader, wider market. And that's lovely. We love making money because it's hard to do in this economy, but I think books as a whole have a way of bringing us together, and that's fantastic and lovely, but you need to also have support systems that aren't necessarily wrapped up in books. So if that's going to a pottery class and making new friends, I joined a run club. I don't even run. But just finding some way to create and make yourself not even being known, because we don't want to be perceived, but to kind of let yourself have a way to express yourself that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get paid or you're going to get something out of it. It's just for you. And so, like, if you are a creative and you're writing and you're like, I have an author who actually does watercolors of like scenes from her books, and those are just for her. She's not using them for marketing. She's not using them for anything except for a way to express herself that's not wrapped up in capitalism. So that's my number one tip outside of having community. And building community is going to be the most integral thing to getting through publishing, because publishing will gaslight you. One of my mentors told me that, and I say it all the time. Publishing will make you feel like you're doing something wrong or that you are the problem. And there is a story for every reader. It's just a matter of taking the time and the energy to find it. And I mean, Kara said she's been in this for over a decade. She's been working to get her books out there for over a decade. And it's a hurry up and wait. We hurry to get to publication. We hurry to get an agent. And sometimes you just have to sit and bask in what you've accomplished thus far. And it sometimes helps if you're not thinking about, yay, I will get paid for this. Just think about the fact that you finished a book. You wrote an entire book, because like not everybody can do that.
Can I actually piggyback off that? I actually think that that's really important, the whole like sitting with it and like acknowledging what you've actually done, and also like thinking beyond the scope of publishing, because like Z and I are in a similar position in which we're somewhat locationally disadvantaged compared to a lot of other people because we both live in Australia. And so again, the like I'm not saying there aren't writers in Australia, but it's harder, I find, to find one, because I feel like publishing can be very like sort of North American and sort of UK based, and very focused around those two areas in particular. But I feel like you then find very specific individuals that you connect with and you go and do things with, and do things that are not writing stuff or author stuff. Like I have friends who I go and like find nice restaurants and eat good food with, and like go and do the kinds like do not I feel like there's a tendency, and I'm like, look, I'm old in the sense that I was very much like into like fan fiction and fandom before coming into like I always wanted to write a book, but I started off with fan fiction and fandom initially, particularly as a teenager. And I always like had this head like feeling in my head or thought in my head that they were very different. The friends you had in real life were very different to your online friends or the friends that you met through those spaces. And that's not true. That's I actually think that's a lie that people tell themselves or people tell them because they think to make them feel bad or to create that hierarchy in their head. But some of the closest friends I have in my life are people that I have met online. I've been to people's weddings that I have solely met maybe like twice, and maybe their wedding was the second time that I met them in person. But I'm saying like those are the kinds of relationships. Do not think that there is some level of deficiency or inferiority to these kinds of relationships that you form. Some of these people are the people that I have spent the most of my time with, and I've shared the most vulnerable and scariest things with, and their significance and the joy and the support that they bring to my life is inherently integral to just me continuing on. And part of that is also because we talk about everything and anything. We don't just talk about writing. We don't just talk about books or whatever it might be. We talk about everything. We talk about work. We talk about dating. We talk about food and family and everything that is going on in our lives. Like people want to form connections with each other, and don't limit that for yourself is probably what I'd also say. It's key to your mental health to also look at things that are just not about putting words on a page, and doing things with people that you enjoy. Like if you enjoy writing with them or talking books with them, you will probably enjoy other things as well, and you probably do have similar interests, or you're probably the type of person who might be like, I was never into pottery, but because you suggested it, I'm happy to go and let's go and try it out. I'm always open to new experiences. So definitely give yourself the option of like forming a genuine friendship with people. And it doesn't have to just be restricted to something capitalism oriented either.
Yeah, piggybacking off Yuva and Shayla just quickly. Another thing is to get out of your own head and your own book, get into other people's heads and their books. So like now, because obviously I don't have like cover art or anything, so like my Instagram and TikTok are mostly just me promoting other people's books, or I join other people's street teams. That can also be a really good way of meeting other people, especially like debut authors or new authors. They often have street teams. But yes, absolutely. So many of my closest friends are online, and they're people I met in the query trenches, in the sub trenches, etc. And these are friendships you will probably have for the rest of your life because, yeah, you talk about so much more than books.
Yeah, I love all those answers. I think it's so important to find community, and I always think like quality over quantity too. That's something that I've learned. So moving on, I wanted to talk generally about what you all think it would look like for the publishing industry to have a meaningful and authentic commitment to uplifting marginalized authors and voices. To kind of piggyback on that, like how do you see your role in advocating for yourself in that sort of movement for diversifying publishing? And then, for Shayla as well, just like how do you see your role in shaping the literary landscape as a literary agent? Not just in terms of, who gets published, but what kinds of stories get prioritized. So yeah, I'll stop there because that was a lot of questions.
Can I say the thing that is often harder to say out loud, but I'm going to say it for the purposes of a recorded panel. Again, lawyer in me. Money. Sorry, I'm just gonna say it. I feel like a big part of this does come, and like I mean, there was a reason why the publishing paid me movement was big. That spreadsheet is still looked at. It was big when I was making decisions about either picking an agent through my whole like, sort of deal auction process. Money is a big factor, and because, like, look, a lot of us don't come from privileged enough backgrounds that we can probably do this full time, particularly when we're starting out and querying. And even when we have our first book deal, I still work full time. My day job starts in an hour, technically. Anyway, anyone from my employer did not see this panel. Anyway, but at the end of the day, like that's a big factor, right? Like, I mean, I feel like it's also what motivates us to continue on. It's the fact that people, I mean, it sucks. We shouldn't be in this kind of position where our labor, and particularly this kind of artistic labor, is associated with a monetary value, but it is. And there is a number and there is a dollar figure that is put to these things at the end of the day. And sometimes there's a lack of a dollar figure, which is then what pushes us to keep writing and to keep trying. I think the what actually looks authentic is really publishing willing to put money where their mouth is. It's all well and good to say that they uplift marginalized voices, but if you're not paying us the way that you're paying people who are not marginalized, it does tell us what you think of us. It does tell us where you put us on the totem pole, for lack of a better word. And I think it does then put us in that uncomfortable position of having to then continuously grift and try and get out there. And that's hard and that's demotivating. I'm thinking of what you were saying, Shayla, about like people who like stop writing or sort of slip and move away from publishing after their first year of debuting. I imagine a lot of that is also financially motivated as well. It's hard. Like it's like, I do a 9 to 5 and I'm lucky enough to be able to do that. I work for a community legal center. So I'm like very passionate about, and I'm an employment lawyer, so I'm very passionate about, work-life balance. But it's demotivating to come home. You've just done your 8-hour day. You have to come home and you have to start thinking, okay, I'm going to write, I'm going to do this. And I'm the type of person who puts a lot of pressure on myself. So writing every day and then maybe not getting anywhere, and there's a limit, and I think money goes a long way for that. I'm not saying that it's the perfect solution because it's not, but I think that that at least shows one, some financial investment in us as people as well as our stories, and two, I think it acknowledges that writing is not easy. It is difficult and it is labor. At the end of the day, it is not something that we all just do in the fairyland and we put out there and just didn't take any time or effort to do. And I think it goes a long way to keeping people in the industry. I think, and I'm saying that not just because, sorry, I'm sort of slipping into your area here, Shayla, but I'm saying that from like not just the writing perspective, but also like agents, editors. Like there has been a lot. If you look at the last couple of years, again, sorry, employment law, so soapbox here, but there's a reason why there have been a lot of strikes. There have been a lot of, a lot of attempts at bargaining for better conditions, particularly for people in publishing. We are seeing it happen right in front of us. Editors being pushed, pushed to their limits. It is not fun. Is not good. It's not good for publishing. It's not good for writers. It is not good for agents. It's not good for editors. It's not good for publishing in general. The people at the top are not seeing that, and that's the case in any kind of industry that you look at. They don't see that, but it is a factor. Money is unfortunately what the world moves around right now, and probably for the very distant future. So, yeah, money.
I totally agree. I was gonna say, I think one thing that publishers specifically could do to like really value marginalized voices and like actually do meaningful work is one, the money issue, right? Like put your money where your mouth is, hire marginalized editors, hire like let them get promoted through the ranks, let them become, I actually don't know what the ranks are, but like up top. Um but also like
Editorial
creativity when
director.
it comes to marketing, right? Because I think as a story I've heard before is like publishers, they might know really, really well how to market uh, a YA, a middle grade book to white audiences. But then when they have an author come in who is Latine or South Asian or white and queer or white and disabled, they don't, it often, I think, and this is often because, you know, the people making these decisions aren't like paid to be creative, to do research, to like hit the ground and be like, okay, so where can I, like, what school should I go to for my author who is from a different community? Like, they might think like I have relationships at these like 10 schools. There's 100 schools in the city. I don't have time to email 90 other schools, so I'm just going to send the book to these 10 schools. Those might not be the right audience for that book. They might not be the audience that's going to connect the best. And so I wish, and again, it comes down to money from the top, right? Like I wish that the top of publishing would invest in letting marketers and publicists and editors be more creative when it comes to marketing their books and publicizing their books. Um, yeah. And yeah, it's just it's money. Like we there is money in publishing. Like we know it. They just it spread it out.
And
Yeah.
particularly because recently they've had to be a lot more open about the kind of money that they have. I'm thinking of very popular court cases that have very open, public, transcribed decisions and testimonies. Like, you're not fooling us anymore.
Yeah, I think for me, I mean, I can't determine how much money you're going to get, but I can advocate for my authors to get as much money as possible because I know in my mind what their books are worth. I think for me, it starts with asking my authors, what is your ideal number for this book? Not everyone will ask that because it's not always something that I can guarantee. It's like I can't guarantee you'll be a New York Times bestseller, but I can guarantee that I'm going to advocate for your book as best as I possibly can. And it's the same when I am trying to get a certain deal amount for my authors. But I think for me, as I've been interacting with more publicity and marketing folks, and I've had 5 books debut this year, so I've seen a little bit from middle grade to adult and how it's worked across these different publishers. Something that I'm doing, just and this is just me specifically, it's different for every agent and agency, is I'm thinking about what I can do in the back end of publicity and marketing that's low cost for my authors. If that means outreach to local indie bookstores to kind of push their book. I actually was talking to a bookseller this week who had never heard of one of my clients' books because the rep for that book didn't show them that book. And I was like, I will bring you a copy. But it's just a lot of footwork, going and being on the ground and saying, how can I help advocate for my author's book to make sure that it's reaching its audience? Because that's, I think, what the key is. And especially as someone who I work in middle grade books. And so for me, I'm like, okay, my daughter is the target audience. Where are her cohorts being found? There's actually a middle grade book club that started here recently, which I'm very excited about for her. But it means that I have to look at not just where I would want to send my readers, but where the readers of my author's books are. So if that means I am making postcards or flyers or cold calling bookstores to be like, hi, this is why you should stock this book. I'm going to do that because I want my authors to have the best chance, not just of earning out, but of their book reaching its readers. Because, like I said earlier, there is a story for every reader. And if it's not in stores and they can't find it, how are they going to see it? Not everyone is online, not everyone is on TikTok or Instagram. And so we have to be really creative in how we are making sure that we're reaching those audiences. And if money is the issue, because everyone spends different amounts on marketing and publicity, it becomes a matter of what can I do to ensure that I know that we've done what we can. And if that means I'm reaching out 6 months before to be like, hi, do we have a publicity and marketing plan? And if we don't, pivoting and kind of deciding what to do next. I know for me, I've started sending like mock up publicity and marketing or like social media posts for my authors so that we can kind of get the ball rolling in a way that is visceral, like they can actually see that we are making a movement, even if it's not necessarily moving the needle, as is the big buzzword. So I think
Um,
that's,
I was
yeah.
just gonna say, oh, I love you, Shayla. Like hearing you doing all of that, I love you. And that's the thing. That's what you want from your agent. And I know everybody says this, it's better to not have an agent than a bad agent, but I have seen so many people fall into the trap. You absolutely do want an agent like Shayla who is very clearly passionate about you. And sometimes that's like the plus side to having an agent who doesn't have like a humongous list that they have to juggle at all times. Um, but something I want to say is that in my case, your advocate should be your agent. And I very much strongly believe that because as authors, we often can't speak up for ourselves as strongly as our agents can because publishers expect agents to push back. They expect agents to be like, "Oh, you're mistreating my author," or like, I'm like, we're kind of expecting more. I don't know how agents say this. Like, Shayla probably knows way more because I don't know how agents do it because I'm a little scaredy cat, and I'm like, okay, like, I was willing to accept like $10 in a packet of Cheetos for my book. I was like, I'll take anything, and my agent was like, no, no, your book is amazing. You're amazing. You deserve more. And if it was not for my agent, like putting their foot down, I I would not be here. And so I think like speak to your agent, and I'm sure Shayla can speak to this, but my agent has fielded so many like called and emails from me just like spiraling into a deep dark pit of despair, because like they were also my agent when I died on sub. So something that I wanted to mention is that I had once again, same with querying. I had the slog experience and I had the unicorn experience. I went on sub and went absolutely nowhere, but then I also sold on sub in record time at auction. Um, and my agent was there for me through both of those experiences. And something I would strongly and I asked them, like at the beginning of my book, I was so scared that they were going to drop me. Like, that's a fear I think that every author who like kind of languishes on sub has. Be open with your agent. Like share with them how you feel, your concerns. And sometimes keep in mind that even if it seems like your agent's not doing anything, they might be doing lots of things in the background, right? And if you need that reassurance, get that reassurance because a good agent will never be like, "Oh my God, what's wrong with you? Like, why are you asking me these questions? Like, go away." A good agent would never do that. A good agent would do exactly what Shayla's talking about, who's like going out of their way for you, but not even just out of their way. Like they are there to assuage your fears, etc. So I would strongly recommend being open with your agent. Their response will tell you so much about whether this is a relationship that works for you. I straight up asked my agent, "Are you gonna drop me if my next books don't sell?" And my agent was like, "No, no, no. We just like revisit, it's etc." Um, so I think that's really, really my number one tip for your advocate is to genuinely find an agent that you can trust and be open with them, be honest with them. The best way they can represent you is if you are honest with them. That like if you're lying to your agent or you're not telling them the full truth or you're going behind your agent's backs, I've heard of some stories of that. You are shooting yourself in the foot. Like, don't do that. I mean, Shayla might be able to speak more to this, but yeah, like I'm curious as well. Please tell me I'm not the only crazy author that spirals into a pit of despair or
100% not. And I was gonna say
Ask me how
sometimes
many
that's
times I've
also
watched
about
Harris spiral, and she's not even my author. Um,
We
but I
do.
mean, that's the thing. I think that, I regularly talk about treating publishing like Tinder because we are really trying to find our perfect match in that sense. And when you're looking for your agent, it shouldn't be like, oh my God, they represented this person and I love them so much. I mean, it can be. It's a great place to start when you're formulating your list of who you will query. But I think it's very important to know what kind of working relationship you want with them because at the end of the day, this is a partnership. Your agent's not making money if you're not making money. And so you have to be a little bit vulnerable with them in a way that you might not be with your editor in order to find that working balance. Because if you don't feel comfortable talking to your editor or your agent about your fears on sub or what's going on with your project or even what you work on next, it's then becomes a question of why are you with this person? Like, why would you want to be with a partner that you cannot communicate with? Because that's not going to be a fun relationship. That's going to be really sad and anxious. And that's not what publishing should be. I mean, publishing is full of anxiety. I even have anxiety and I chose this career. But I think it's really important to know going in, like you have this idea of what you want in a partner romantically. What do you want in an agent partner? And that's very different for everyone. I know a lot of people will say that they want someone who's very editorial or they want someone who's like a little hands off and they just send the book out into the wild and they know nothing until they've got an offer. Having an idea of what you want that working relationship to be like is going to help form the basis of every agent call, every conversation with your agent after that. And it's like, again, it's like marriage. You kind of just have to continue to grow together or you grow apart. And so being very clear up front is going to help you more than anything.
And I'm just gonna also piggyback on that because I feel like I don't know if other people are also like this, but I'm definitely like I'm allergic to confrontation, and particularly when it's about myself. Like I wonder if it's very similar for you as well, Shayla. But like I'm very good at advocating for other people, like my clients. Yep, that's fine. Like I'll go to bat for you. But when it comes to myself, I cannot say a thing, and sometimes it's about a muscle that you have to just continuously flex. And you do have to, like, I mean, we say this about our stories, but it's also with the relationships that we form with industry personnel like agents, editors. You do need to a certain amount of like just flexing that muscle of like communicating and being open about, what you want. I mean, within reason, particularly with publishing, but like it's hard and it's like no one's saying make it like you shouldn't make everything a confrontation, absolutely not. But putting yourself out there is the only way. Like shoot your shot also applies to these kinds of situations as well. Like if you don't say or you don't ask, you don't get. And it's scary, but and I'm not saying that I've got it down pat because I have absolutely have not, but it's just something that I think you get better with time. So don't feel like too bad if you can't do it right from the get-go. Some people can, and I'm like deeply envious of you, but if you're anything like me, you will develop those skills, and it gets better with time. And it's scary, definitely, because you're never sure where you stand with anyone. But like again, it's like like what Z was saying. It's like a good agent would never do this, and the same way I'm sure for Shayla, like a good author would never do this or say this. So it's you figure out, I think, for yourself whether that partnership is working. The more and more you have to test it out sometimes. It's the only way that you know for sure. I think both people on that equation.
Yeah, and I think for me, when it comes to advocating, I mean, I'm a mom first, so I'm advocating for small humans on a regular basis. And for me, my authors are very similar in the fact that, like, I'm advocating for their book from start to finish. I'm advocating for why you should buy it. And then I'm continuing to advocate on the back end as to what might be wrong. So I know when we get like cover copy or we get cover designs, I immediately call my author and I'm like, hi, before you say you love this, can you tell me what you don't like about it and what you would like changed? Because I want them to feel comfortable to say, hey, this isn't what I envisioned. Because I have had talks with other authors that weren't personally mine. And they were like, oh, yeah, I said I love my cover, but I actually hate it. And it's like, if you would just talk to your agent, it would not have ended this way. And the thing is, like, yes, we are in a bit, this is a business. But for me, I'm a professional fangirl who just happens to love books and like selling them. So for me, I have to make sure that you love your book and you want to put it up on your social media and you want to take pictures with it. And so if there's something that you're not loving about this process, whether that be the working relationship with your editor or something's happening on the back end that you're not comfortable with and you don't know how to address it, I like to do regular check-ins with my authors. I'm actually about to schedule my like 6 month check-ins with them, just like see what's working and what's not. I think it's very important to make sure that you feel comfortable, if not coming to your editor or your other publishing partners, to come to your agent and be like, hi, this is the problem that I'm having. So that over time you do become more comfortable saying, hey, I actually didn't like this. And you're right. It is a muscle that you have to flex and get acquainted with. But if you don't feel comfortable talking to your agent, it comes back to that comfortability. It's going to be something that you never really get the hang of.
Yeah, agreed. I think just in the sake of time, I want to just end on a positive note. I think, Karis, you asked this question, and I think it's a great one. What keeps you in this industry? We know and have spoken about how it can be extra difficult to navigate publishing as a marginalized author. Why do you keep going? Why do you stick with it? I'd be curious, and I think that's a really great place to end the panel.
I mean, listen, I've been writing stories. I've been obsessed with stories since I was born. And publishing is the way to tell stories and get them into the hands of other people. And ultimately, I am driven by my need, my desire to write stories and share them. And I have found over the years that like sharing stories, whether it's nonfiction or fiction, it it forms a bridge with others and it helps foster relationships and community. And I've been helped by stories I've read where, I mean, the first story I read that had like a character taking medication on the page for depression was like changed my life and made me feel so seen. And I aspire to write stories for the depressed, religiously traumatized queer girlies out there. To be like, listen, like you're not alone. And no matter how bad things look right now, like there's a light at the end of the tunnel. You will get through it. There's hope. And that's, I mean, publishing is how I get to share that message. So I mean, they are a means to an end.
I think for me, it's partly somewhat ambivalence being like, I'm a person and I exist. And I want other people to acknowledge that I exist. And people like me also exist. And definitely, I think a bit of spite sometimes as well. Like I'm not in a bad way, but sometimes, like I'm very much driven by the fact that like for me, and I feel like this will like, particularly for people who are starting out querying, you'll get this question sometimes, like when you like particularly thinking like query manager and stuff like that. It's a common question that I remember seeing. It's like, what inspired you to write this book? Like why this book? What prompted it? And for me, a lot of the story, like a lot of the answer really was is that like, I never grew up with stories, movies, whatever it might be, where people like me were on the screen or on the page. I think now is absolutely better than what it was, when I was growing up. I'm like, but at the same time, there's still a dearth, I feel, for these kinds of stories. There is still a lack of acknowledgement, I think, in all industries that, people who don't look a certain way and don't act a certain way exist. And so I think a part of it is just wanting, I want the, the disabled, queer, South Asian girls who come after me to know that, we do exist. We are a part of the community. We're a valid part of community and society. Our stories are important, and even if they're not important, they're still valid. Like, I might not even like do much, but at the same time, um, I'm a person and I exist. And so other people should also know that I exist. And I think we have the capacity to be like every kind of character as well, not just straight, white, able-bodied, etc. People like, we can be the heroes, we can lift swords and kill dragons and ride dragons and do all the sorts of things that other people have been able to do for so many years. And I just wanted other people to know that too.
Love, I think, it forms the basis of all spite. You know how they say that the opposite of hate is not love, it's indifference. Um, and I do think love has a big part of it. Love for your community, love for writing. That's a really important thing. I think I just can't stop writing. Like even when, even when I was being rejected and stuff, and I think you can all relate to this, you just can't stop. Like, while I was languishing on sub, I was working on another book. Everyone always says that, working your other book. And it's very true, working your other book, because that way not everything hinges on this one book. Because very, very few of us, I think, ever publish our first books. And so the only thing that fuels us, that keeps us going, is that passion, that need to write. I always say that I'm like possessed. Like, I'm like possessed, like frantically writing. Maybe it's the ADHD hyper focus, but I can like write for like 12 hours without peeing. I've given myself a UTI. Wait, that was way too TMI. But on a
I'm
positive
pretty sure that's
note,
the ADHD.
it's the ADHD for sure. But yeah, like you just if you are always looking for external validation or a reward at the end of the tunnel, I don't think that's necessarily completely sustainable. Absolutely we need a reward at the end of the tunnel, but I think the thing that fuels us is that passion, that love of stories, of creativity, of like seeing ourselves and our communities represented, to be able to champion people who don't have this opportunity. Like I come from My grandmother grew up in poverty. She's illiterate, and she, started working at a rubber plantation when she was 8 years old. Um, and so, like, I come from a family of people who never had this amazing opportunity to write books, and we are almost doing this for all the other people who can't, who don't have the privilege. Like, I basically taught myself English by reading and writing, and watching way too much American TV, hence this accent. I'm not even American. Why do I have this accent?
I wasn't going to mention it
Yeah.
because I know you're in
Wait,
Melbourne.
I am in Melbourne, and I'm Malaysian, so why do I have this accent? Yeah, but because, like, seriously, 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 media changes lives. Books change lives. Like, there are so many books that have changed my life that have basically raised me. Honestly, I feel like books raised me. Um, and I think, yeah, wow, that ended really awkwardly. But yes, love. Love is the answer. Love and spite.
I think for me, I'm a reader first and an agent second. So as a reader, I want to help bring stories that I love to the world. And so getting to bring diverse voices, whether that be for the middle grade children who are like my daughter who want to see themselves on the pages, or for the adults who want to read smut like me. There's never a dull day and two stories are never the same, but I get to help bring these stories to light. And one of these stories might be the one that makes someone a reader. And so I can't imagine a better career than being able to do the work that I do.
Yeah, I love that. Well, thank you all so much for taking the time out of your day to talk. This has been a great panel. And like I said, if anyone has, I know there were some questions we didn't get to, so um, please feel free to reach out and don't be afraid. We're here. And yeah, I'll end it here.